So for our last segment, we're going to be doing a panel discussion. So we've got a few folks going to come up. We're going to discuss private lands burning on Delmarva. So I'm going to have a few kind of prompting questions to get the conversation going, and then we're going to send it out specifically to our private landowners in the group here to field any questions they might have about burning their property or burning in the state or county that you live in. And we're going to have a panel of experts up here to help guide you there. All right. So with that, I'm going to introduce, we've got Chris Smith, who we've just heard from. He's going to be on our panel here. He's with the Maryland Forest Service, Eastern Region Fire Manager. I'm going to ask Daniel Lawson, who's here with us today from Maryland NRCS. He's a regional wildlife biologist. And then we have Kyle Magdziuk, who's from Tall Timbers Research Station. He is a game bird biologist and prescribed fire coordinator. Yes, so it's I would say sit or stand, whatever your preference is, and we're just going to pass the mic back and forth. So apologies for that.
We actually have two microphones, so you can just speak right into there. There's a microphone right there. Oh, okay. He has microphones.
Okay.
Bear with us just a second here while we get set up. All righty. So we'll get started here. I'm going to give everyone a chance to just introduce themselves. Two of the folks up here we haven't met already today. We certainly met Chris a little bit earlier, but I'm going to hand off the mic here and let folks give you a little introduction to themselves and how they're involved in prescribed fire work.
Daniel Lawson, so I'm the regional wildlife biologist for Natural Resources Conservation Service. So my main job is, help administer USDA Farm Bill appropriations for, wildlife habitat management on the shore.
I'm Kyle Magdziuk, prescribed fire coordinator and game bird biologist for Tall Timbers. And for those of you who don't know what Tall Timbers is, it's a private nonprofit organization that advocates to protect the right to burn for land management. We also use years of science and research to fuel management decisions, focusing on quail expansion. So in the region, I work with several different partners to deliver outreach, education, and training opportunities for fire and quail.
And just again, I'm Chris Smith. I'm one of the fire managers with the Maryland Forest Service. I cover Eastern and Central Maryland. As an agency, we're responsible. We're going to be issuing you your burning permits. We're reviewing the burn plans and approving them and things like that.
Make sure everyone online can hear me here. All right, so I'm going to kick it off with a question here, and this one's mainly geared towards you, Chris, and you've touched a little bit on this already, but could you just outline the general process for a landowner who'd like to use prescribed fire on their property, what they need to know, what rules and regulations do they need to follow, and the training requirements? And, we'll talk specifically for Maryland.
So yeah, big thing I would tell you if you're looking to get into this, give us a call. This thing apparently is a microphone too. Give us a call. Somebody from our staff can come out, visit with you, take a look at what you want to burn. I'm a big fan of let's go out and see what you actually got. Is it flammable? Is fire a good option for what you want to do? And from there, we can talk about helping you develop a burn plan on the property, and kind of go down that road of saying, okay, do you have the experience to be able to be the burn boss for your burn, or do we need to kind of get you in touch with somebody? As a side note, one of the things that's I think is great about this workshop, as well as the Prescribed Fire Council coming next year or later this year and all that, is this is a great opportunity for you guys to get together where person A may not be quite there and be able to run their burn, but the person 3/4 of a mile down the road is. So you guys hook up and do your burn, and help each other out kind of thing. So that sort of cooperation, I think, would go a long ways. But yeah, big thing is if you're looking to get into doing a burn, give us a call. Let's come out and take a look at what you have, and we can kind of go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Just hold on to this and then y'all can pass that. Okay. All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Chris. And yeah, we've heard it in a few presentations. Step one is reaching out to your local agencies, your forestry agencies, your natural resource agencies, and just starting there. It's typically the first step. And at some point in the process of getting fire on your property, you're going to end up having to speak to them anyways. So best thing to do is go straight to the source. All right, so this one is going to be a little bit more geared towards Daniel and Kyle here, but something I think a lot of landowners are probably thinking about when they're thinking about burning their property is what sort of cost share programs are there out there to assist landowners with implementing prescribed fire on their property? And could you briefly describe kind of what those opportunities are for our landowners? We'll start with you, Daniel.
Yeah, so I can start, I guess, from the federal side. Under USDA, we have two main programs which we administer funds for prescribed fire and those things associated with it. The first is the EQIP program, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So this program is mainly, just your basic cost share. You do the practice, you get reimbursed, a set amount. So the last I checked, and Matt, Chris, you guys might want to compare notes on this. Our rates for EQIP was pretty well covering, the Forest Services. Yeah. So
Fed rates are far higher.
So at current, it compensates really well. The types of burns that we typically, will cost share for are basis fuel, site preparation, understory burn, and volatile fuels. So any of those, what we would do, I guess, from the beginning is myself or, one of the resources staff would come out, look at your property, get an idea of your objectives on the property, determine whether or not a fire is going to be appropriate. And if so, what kind of burn regime you're looking at, what type of infrastructure you have, what options do we have from a cost share standpoint that could help you implement, burns on your property. So once all that is determined, then we would enter into this EQIP contract. Obviously, we'd have to get involved with either DNR or state forest, most likely to get the burn conducted. Also, I think a new opportunity coming up is going to be some of these local co-ops, landowners that have equipment, that have experience. I really believe that, the long term, it's the private landowners there. That's going to be where it's most sustainable to have fire on the landscape. So yeah, definitely EQIP is probably the primary, the way we would implement that. Secondarily, we have the Conservation Stewardship Program. It runs in 5-year contract lengths. This is pretty much designed, for landowners already doing a good job, with management on their property. But this just provides that extra kick, just to encourage, continued good land stewardship. So with that program, the minimum payment you get every year just for being involved in the program is $4,000. On top of that, for any practice that you implement, you'll be compensated for that as well. So it really sets you up long term, to have money coming in to incentivize you to continue doing good stewardship. Really, those are the two main programs right now that we're using. And obviously, I'm working very closely with the state agencies and some of the NGOs to make sure all this stuff gets delivered.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Daniel just said, I don't necessarily do any cost share. When I'm working with private landowners, I'll just refer them to Daniel or the local NRCS office, and then just help them implement the management practices for those cost share programs.
Awesome. So the moral of the story is there's a lot of opportunity out there to help offset the cost of this work that many of us know can cost quite a bit of money. So there's a lot of great resources out here, again, reaching out to, your state agencies to begin with, reaching out to agencies like NRCS. They're going to be able to steer you towards these programs and let you know what you're eligible for, what they can do for you and how they can help you meet your objectives on your property. So, again, it's really important to reach out to folks and see what's out there. Because 9 times out of 10, there's going to be something out there to help support the work you want to do on your property. So I wanted to prime our conversation with really those two questions, and for the rest of the conversation is just going to be coming out to you guys and fielding questions. So I've got someone here I think is eager to ask a question. We'll go ahead start with you.
Daniel, maybe you know the answer to this. What is the reimbursement rate per acre for doing a controlled burn?
Yeah, so I did write all this down. For equip, depending on what it is, obviously, but for herbaceous fuel, so your fields mainly, that's $34 an acre. Site preparation, $176 an acre. Understory burns, which might be applicable to your property, bud, $73 an acre. And it goes up as, the fuel level becomes more complex and more volatile.
And just to reiterate for our folks here on Zoom that the question was reimbursement rates for prescribed fireworks. So.
Yeah, I mean, and the rates, as far as that goes, it's based on an average cost. We try to cover 75 to 90% of it. In some cases, it sounds like we're covering 200% of it, but that's subject to change. We also, the one I didn't mention is, there's other practices we can cost share on too that are directly tied to this. Fire breaks is one of them. We pay per foot. It's hard to kind of get all this together in your head, but for a brand new fire break where you're having to bring a dozer in or clear a spot and do heavy disking, it's about $3.59 a foot. So haven't got to really test that out to see the compensation on that yet, but it's there, just so you know.
All right. Do I have another question?
Online.
Yeah, we'll take one from online.
Al Glenn asked, you understand some states such as Pennsylvania have passed laws to help encourage prescribed fire. Specifically, I think laws like this even offer protection from liability as long as the prescribed fire is done correctly by experienced and trained individuals. Does Maryland have any such laws? If not, are there any efforts you're aware of to get such a law passed?
So I'll take that one, a little bit I know about it. So Pennsylvania, up until they passed their law, as I understand it, was a state where it was extremely prohibitive to burn. They couldn't even burn their own properties, state agencies. So one of the efforts of their prescribed fire council was to pass some legislation to allow them to be more proactive with fire. In Maryland, we don't have that issue per se where there's where we're prohibited from doing burns. So at this point, we don't have any intention of going down that road, but you never know.
Awesome. Any other questions from here in the room? I've got one right here.
David Montgomery, Texas, Virginia, in places where fire is not possible. And this may be a suggestion for a follow-up class. Other alternatives such as land clearing equipment, boats, chemical, can we achieve the same goals? Or is that's I guess a question. I'm looking at some of my properties. We can't even walk on some of it stuff without waiting.
Yep.
Put a dozer.
Yep.
And if you're gonna light it on fire, it's a nightmare for the town.
Yep. So the question is, burning might not be possible on every acre of your property. What are the alternatives? So you reach the same desired end state that you might use fire to achieve, things like equipment, timber management, herbicide use, things like that. So.
Yeah, so some good alternatives to fire. You can do annual disking. You can do some chemical applications. Anything that can really disturb that ground and try to set back that early succession or whatever you're trying to burn. Those would be decent alternatives.
Yeah. So also just to add on, your scenario you were talking about, it's really wet. Fire's not practical, right? So yeah, as depending on your end state, your objective, these forest mulching heads do a heck of a job. Those are all tools that are available. There's an instance on Loch Raven Reservoir up in Baltimore County. It's not that it's too wet to burn, it's too peoply to burn. So, we've got two forest mulcher heads up there, and we're going to be treating a 12-acre block around one of their fishing centers to try to do some hazardous fuel reduction work in there as well. So, yeah, bottom line is depending on what your end state objectives are, fire's not, the only answer out there. There's certainly other options as well.
All right. I'll take question back.
is for the private landowners, they're gonna be burning extensively throughout the year, 2 years, 3 years, over and over again. Is there any classes that you could recommend to them, like the S-130, S-19, they could learn about fire division?
Yep. So, yep. The question is there training opportunities for private landowners out there to get more familiar with fire behavior and prescribed fire use? And, I think the short answer is absolutely. And I'll let some of the folks up here maybe Chris can touch on what the state of Maryland offers. And maybe also mention kind of what's available out there in the virtual space as well.
Sure. So there's a lot of wildland fire classes that are good entry level classes. NWCG, National Wildland Coordinating Group, has moved to a lot of these classes are available to folks self-study online. So the S-130, the basic firefighter training, the S-190, the intro to fire weather. There's some L-180, that's a leadership class. Those are all available self-study online. With the S-130 to complete it, technically you got to come out for a field day. And we offer that a couple times a year. And a lot of that information is available on our training website. There's some other classes beyond that, S-290, which is intermediate fire behavior or fire weather, I believe. There's a fair amount of online training out there that you can do, at your own pace, and increase your knowledge. I think speaking a little bit early maybe, but with, the fire councils coming on board, there'll probably be more opportunities like this. Like I said, there's going to be a couple-day workshop we're putting on in April here on the shore. So should be a lot of opportunities coming up for training and places for y'all to expand your knowledge.
Yeah, like Chris mentioned, where council's coming online, like I mentioned in my presentation, it's one of the primary objectives of a prescribed fire council is to offer opportunities like that for folks in the state. So it's something that we'll want to be hitting the ground running and making sure that there's opportunities like that for everyone out there. We got any more questions right here?
Yeah, I'm interested in prescribed fires for control. Well, one question that I always have is how is prescribed fire selected towards moving invasive species while also native species? Do a burn in a single day, how is it going to promote native species while destroying invasive?
Questions about invasives and using fire to control invasives.
So in very many cases, fire alone is not going to be your answer. What it does though, you're removing a lot of your thatch. So if you have to do, chemical treatment, that's really when, your invasives are going to be most prone when they're younger. So really it's more of a facilitating practice. In some cases, some species, are not as fire adapted, especially on like xeric sites or some that are fairly dry. By introducing that fire, you might at least shift the balance more into the favor of the natives that are adapted to that. But mostly, say by and large, it's normally another practice associated that you get the coverage on.
Your seasonal timing of fire can help that too. Later growing season burns might help remove some unwanted grasses. And then is also known to help with sweet gum resprouts that significantly decreases those. So just seasonal application of fire.
To kind of piggyback off of that, like you've experienced with controlling fragments with fire, specifically like in a wetland situation.
So controlling frag with fire. Big question here on the shore.
Sure. So Phragmites is an interesting animal. Generally, you're going to need to spray it first and then burn it. And it's a cycle that probably goes on over a couple cycles to get it knocked back. The thing I've experienced with Phragmites is if it's got water underneath of it, or if there's nothing underneath of it to really help carry that fire, it can be difficult to get going. So yeah, it's spray and burn. That's generally, I don't have the actual prescription in my head, but yeah, that's generally the practices. There's some sort of chemical application before it goes to seed head, I think, right? And then in the fall or over the winter, go ahead and run fire through it. But again, frag is kind of finicky. If in my experience, if it's water standing under it or there's nothing to help carry that fire underneath, it can be tough to get going. We are looking, sure.
What we're finding out is that, you know, we're doing 5-year contracts, with our aerial spraying of the frag,
Okay.
3-year contracts for aerial spraying of the frag, and it's really not controlling the frag. It might be controlling it, it is not reducing the amount of frag, the way it's.
They're spraying it and not burning it is, so I think generally the rule of thumb is spray it and then burn it. Give it a little bit of time, see what comes back. You got to build that fuel load back up before you got enough to carry another fire through it. That's generally what, so Hart Miller Island out in the middle of the bay, it's basically 2 islands that they put together to put all the spoil out of the inner harbor in, basically. The whole northern cell, it's like 300 acres and it is nothing but Phragmites. So they've sprayed it, and they've had some pretty good luck out there with spraying it and burning it, and we're hoping to get out there this winter and run a fire through that northern cell. But you know, they've had some success spraying it, burning it, letting it go a little while, spray it again, burn it, you know, because you got to let that fuel build back up, and eventually it gets manageable.
All right, any other questions? Anything at all? All right, here we go.
Same line of these 2 questions. If you have something that's taking over the field, like dog kennel, is it better to burn the field and then come back and target spray the dog kennel, or spray the dog kennel and then burn?
I'm not familiar with.
So to summarize the question is, you know, if you have a site that's being overtaken by, we'll just say any species that's a nuisance and not a management objective of yours, you know, is it effective to burn it and then pair that with another treatment? Dog fennel was a specific example, which is a good one for here on Delmarva. And I know Daniel's got some thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's, there he is.
Where you can get that dog kennel out of the field.
Yeah, I mean, so the good thing about dog fennel is it's very tall, you know, so, you know, most of your herbaceous cover is going to be found beneath that. So, you know, the wick bar application, which is, you know, if you're not familiar, pretty much just a PVC pipe. It's got a wick running through it, and you put your chemical onto the, you know, the vegetative matter of that dog fennel. Really, what we have found, and the research does suggest that also a aptly timed mowing, you know, in the late summer or summer, really July, also does set it back just about as effective as chemical application does. Fire, I haven't personally read much, you know, that alludes to that being a good control for it. You know, so the main ones that we experiment with a lot, I say we experiment with, we have, you know, several easements that it's very prolific on, which, you know, in its place and in patches, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good cover, but you certainly don't want the whole site, you know, to be solid dog fennel. So we have been experimenting a little bit with, you know, herbicide treatments, mechanical treatments as well, and then pairing those with fire. So definitely a combination of things. I mean, you gotta really take your chances to get that under control in as many ways as you can.
From a fire management perspective, dog fennel, it's not very flammable. So one of the things that does present a challenge if you're incorporating fire into the management regime that Daniel's talking about is it just doesn't like to burn very well. So it can make it really difficult to have an effective fire move across your burn unit when there's a lot of dog fennel. So, you know, back to Deborah's point earlier in the day is some species are much more fire adapted than others. And the ones that aren't fire adapted try to keep fire from burning across a landscape. And that's dog fennel is certainly one of them. Got a question right here.
What is dog kennel?
Excuse me again?
What is dog kennel?
What is dog fennel? So it is, well, it's a herbaceous plant, grows very tall,
Very tall.
can grow as tall as probably 5,
Or single stem.
close 6 feet, single stem. Yeah, yeah. Well, depending on how productive your site is, it can get pretty big. Just imagine a really big leafy green plant. All right, we've got a question over here.
Burning in a wet area, how does fire impact cypress? Is it cypress and how resilient is that?
But yeah, so I'll field that one for everyone. So a lot of the fire management we do specifically on our Nassawango Creek Preserve here in Lower Shore, Maryland. We use a lot of what we call a natural fuel break. So, you know, you can imagine before the days of putting a fire line in, what's going to stop a fire moving across the landscape, and that's going to be a stream, a river, and the floodplain of that stream or river. So in a lot of cases, we let our prescribed fires kind of make their way down into the ecotone, down into the edge of the floodplain there. And what happens is fire does interact with bald cypress with the knees, and you know it's not specifically a fire adapted species, so it is sensitive to fire. You know, an intense fire that makes its way towards a cypress can really stress it. It could potentially kill a large tree. But what it has as an advantage is the environment in which it exists is not very flammable. So what we see time and time again is when our fire comes down from the uplands, which, you know, here on the shore isn't very high up, it makes its way down into these lower, wetter areas, and the material on the ground is just not as flammable. So we see our flame lengths go from 2 to 3 feet down to 6 inches extremely quick. And then what that fire does is it just kind of meanders around and it puts itself out in a lot of cases. And one thing that we do intentionally when we're burning areas like that, where cypress, you know, Atlantic white cedar is an example, is we burn at times of year when we know the water table's up higher and those areas are more saturated than they might be, let's say, in September. So there's a way to mitigate it. You know, they're certainly vulnerable to fire, but again, you know, that environment they're in is not conducive to fire. So they kind of protect themselves in that way. All right.
Just to follow up on costs, we're a prescribed fire contractor working in Maryland and across the Mid-Atlantic, and when we're working with private landowners, one of the biggest challenges they're facing is the cost of the prescribed fire. So I was wondering if Daniel mentioned the EQIP funding. You know, a lot of those numbers are historically lower and based off of back when the agencies were providing, you know, the assistance to burn on private lands. So just curious about the panel, either Daniel, if you know that if the cost share numbers are getting adjusted up, or the panel knows any other funding opportunities for landowners to help offset some of the costs.
Yeah, so really the way that, you know, we determine what the rates will be set at is getting quotes, getting invoices from, you know, people like yourself. You know, I would say the majority of the fire that gets implemented so far has been done, you know, by DNR, which, you know, there's not really any cost to the landowner for that. Forest Service is different now. So really having private contractors, you know, being able to submit, you know, the landowner, private contractors doing fire for a landowner, the landowner submitting a bill for that, you know, that's really what we need to fuel these prices. So it's all, it all kind of comes back on itself. It's just, we have to have those invoices to adjust those.
I need to see you after this. I administer the Woodland Incentive Program, which the Forest Service offers. It's a 65% cost share that complements EQIP in a lot of applications. Prescribed fire is one of our cost shares. Like he said, you know, the landowner does the practice, pays for it, submits it to the county forester, the county forester submits it to me, and you get reimbursed 65% of what it costs. And with EQIP, if it's added, then that goes up to 90% of your total cost of doing this. But I need to talk to the private contractor because we are getting ready to adjust our rates on a lot of these practices.
All right, excellent. Well, we're creeping up on the end of our time for today, but I think if folks are willing to hear one more question and then my really brief thanks for everyone, we can take one more.
I just wanted to piggyback on what they were talking about. You know, obviously the amount of hands that went up in the air earlier, went up in the air earlier when I asked how many were looking to get into this world and do prescribed fire. There's quite a few that went up. So, yes, we, the Forest Service, we're doing burns. We're trying to expand on private property, but we've only got so much capacity to be able to do that. You know, opportunities like James, right? Yep. So opportunities like James's company, if you can have somebody like him come in and help you out and piggyback these two cost shares and get your costs down to comparable to what, you know, the state may be charging or something like that, well, there's a win potential option for you guys as well. So, again, that's one of the cool things about getting everybody kind of in a room like this is being able to have these conversations and seeing what those different avenues out there are. So, just a thought on that.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you so much. Appreciate the panelists all for speaking with us today.